For this next blog post of my time here at UCD, I figured I'd take a time to talk about academics at UCD and kind of in Ireland in general. All in all, the academics here are fairly similar to those in the U.S., but there are some key differences. One difference that I think everyone here that I've talked to, all the Americans here that I've talked to have noticed, is the breakdown of grades. Back in the States, at least at Temple, in my experience, you'll find that there may be maybe a homework grade, maybe an attendance grade, of course a final, sometimes a midterm, and then some tests or quizzes. Here you can find just a large exam and then maybe something small. For example, one of my classes, the final is 50%, and then there's 3 other assignments that make up the other 50, which is the closest class in the States that I have. And then my most extreme class is 90% of the grade is the final, and 10% is 3 homework assignments throughout the semester, the 3 combined to that 10%. So obviously there's a lot of heat on for that final. Another major difference is the breakdown of what defines an A, B, C, etc. The A's here start somewhere in the high 70s and go all the way up to 100%. And then it goes down B, C, D, and it actually goes, I think, all the way to G or H or something, which is at a 0. And a passing grade is a 40% or higher, so a D minus is 40%, which is different. Now, an advantage of studying abroad here, at least through Temple, is you take the classes pass-fail, which just means you need to pass, which is a D minus, which is 40%, which sounds easy, especially if you consider what a 40% in America would be, but you have to remember that the classes are designed that the average grade is really a C here, whereas although they say that in America, I don't know if that's been my experience anyway, that the average grade truly is a C in most classes. Here, one of our teachers the other day was talking about grades on our papers and said that a C is really an average here. A B is a pretty darn good paper, and she said she rarely ever gives out A's. So it seems like they stick more to that pattern, that the C is an average pattern than we do. And then, of course, they build in that there's no curving, but the curve is essentially built into the percentage. So when a C starts just below an 80%, or an A starts just below an 80%, that's just accounted for in the difficulty of the test. Classes in general, I think I've hit on this a little bit before, but now I feel like I have a better understanding, now that we're wrapping up the semester, of what academics really are here. The classes are pretty much all lecture. That's my experience anyway. I know some other people here have some smaller classes. I have 4 classes, one of which is about 25 to 30 people, and the rest are all over 100. My one lecture class does have a tutorial that breaks out, and that has about 30 people in it. But for the most part, they are large, which, again, depending on what classes you've taken at any school in America, that could also be the case. My personal experience has not been that at Temple. I've been in, I'd say, an average of 25 people in most of my classes, with a couple lectures in my time, but here it seems like that's much more the norm. Another thing I've noticed is attendance here is not nearly as enforced. Attendance is not an element of our grade for any of our classes, at least any of my classes. And part of that is they take pass-fail classes here for first couple of years typically, and then take grades for the last bit once it gets into their major. So they don't find it as necessary to show up to class all the time. Most of us abroad kids have been attending like we would in America, of course depending on the class and if we feel it necessary, but teachers understand that, and they're okay, I guess you could say okay with it, although I guess it frustrates them if students come and complain about grades later. A bunch of them have commented on that, if you don't attend and get bad grades, but that's understandable. The other thing worth noting, which I don't know much about yet, and I'll talk about in my final blog post before I go home, right after I get home, is the finals here. The finals here are offered in a 2-week time, similar to the Temple, where there's time slots. However, they're not held on campus. They're actually held at some sort of other facility. I don't know if it's actually a testing facility or if it's a convention center or something like that they rent out. but you have a set time. You actually have assigned seats. The proctor is not your teacher, and they're not allowed to be in the room beyond the first 30 minutes, I believe I was told. Very, very strict about what you can and cannot show up with. It seems to me to be a little excessive protocol, but then again, we come from where we just take our finals in the same room, sitting in the same seats we probably sat in the whole year, just at a different time. So more on that later. All in all, though, I would say coming from Temple, coming from the difficulty of classes in America and the way that every grade matters, it's easier here because you don't have that same kind of weight on individual things. However, the pressure is building up now as I approach finals. One of my classes, the finals were 70%, another's 50%, another one's 60%, another one's 90% of my grade. Which, although I've done well in everything else thus far, and I don't think I have to worry too much about it, it does still put the pressure on to make sure you, especially the 90%, with no examinations, you don't know what the teacher's tests look like, whereas at Temple, I usually get to see what a test looks like before we end up taking it. I guess it's all for now, and I'll be back with another post soon.